Jungkook fights a mysterious, fatal illness as Jimin refuses to let go. Love, fear, and hidden truths collide in a heartbreaking battle for time. Fall asleep, Jungkook, please. If you fall asleep now, you won't wake up. Jimin's voice cracked as his arms tightened instinctively, pulling Jungkook closer against his chest while the rain hammered against the hospital windows like it was trying to break in. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, casting fragile shadows across Jungkook's pale face. His breathing was shallow, uneven, each inhale trembling like it had to fight its way out of him. Jungkook tried to smile, but it barely formed. "Haeyoung, you're shaking." "Not," Jimin lied immediately, even as his fingers trembled where they tangled in Jungkook's damp hair. "You're the one who's cold." Jungkook wasn't just cold. He was fatting. The machines beside the bed emitted a soft, relentless rhythm, beep, 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 like a countdown neither of them dared to acknowledge. Jimin pressed his forehead against Jungkook, eyes squeezed shut as if he could transfer warmth, strength, anything. "Stay with me," Jimin whispered. "You promised me, remember, you said we'd go to Busan together again, you said you'd teach me how to surf properly this time." Jungkook's lips parted slightly, a weak breath escaping. "You kept falling." Let out a broken laugh, wet with tears. "Yeah, so you still owe me that." For a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. No doctors, no illness, no fear. Just warmth trying to exist in a place that reeked of antiseptic and endings. But then Jungkook's body tensed suddenly. A sharp, violent cough tore through him, and Jimin's heart lurched as dark red stained the white sheets. Too much blood. Always too much. "Doctor," Jimin shouted, panic slicing through his voice. "Somebody help." Footsteps rushed in, voices overlapping, hands pulling at Jimin's shoulders, but he refused to let go. "Please, you can't stay this close. I'm not leaving him." Jimin snapped, clutching Jungkook tighter as if the world itself was trying to rip him away. "You fix him while I'm here. I'm not moving." The doctor hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding, urgency overtaking protocol. Tubes were adjusted, injections prepared, orders thrown into the air like lifelines. Jimin barely heard any of it. All he could feel was Jungkook's hand weakly gripping his shirt. "Haeyoung," Jungkook murmured, his voice barely audible beneath the chaos. No." Jimin shook his head violently, tears falling freely now. "Don't say it, you're not allowed to say that." Jungkook's eyes softened, something fragile and knowing flickering in them. "You always interrupt me." "Good," Jimin choked. "Then I'll keep interrupting you forever." A faint smile appeared, the kind that used to light up entire stages but now barely held together. "Sounds exhausting." "It is," Jimin whispered, pressing a desperate kiss to Jungkook's temple. "So you have to stay and deal with me." Machines suddenly spiked. A sharp, piercing sound cut through the room and everything froze. His heart rate, "Prepare." "No, no, no." Jimin's voice dissolved into a whisper as he tightened his hold, refusing to loosen even an inch. "Jungkook, look at me, look at me." Jungkook's gaze fluttered, struggling, searching, and then it found him. Even in that fragile state, even with death hovering so close, Jungkook's eyes were steady when they met Jimin's. "Not scared," Jungkook breathed. Jimin shook his head, his tears falling onto Jungkook's face. "You should be, I'm terrified." A faint pause lingered between them, heavy and unspoken. "I know," Jungkook whispered. "That's why I tried to hide it." The words hit harder than anything else. Jimin froze. "What do you mean?" But Jungkook's eyes were already slipping, his strength draining like water through broken glass. "You knew?" Jimin's voice trembled, anger and heartbreak colliding. "You knew you were sick and you didn't tell me." No answer came, only the fragile rise and fall of Jungkook's chest. Something inside Jimin shattered. "All this time," he whispered, voice hollow. "You were smiling, laughing, performing, and I didn't see it. I didn't see you hurting." His grip tightened, almost desperate now. "I was right there," Jimin continued, voice breaking apart. "I was right next to you and I still didn't notice." The machine stabilized slightly, the chaos calming into a tense quiet, but nothing felt stable, not anymore. Jimin lowered his head, pressing his forehead against Jungkook. Again, his voice barely a breath. "I'm not letting you go," he said. "Even if you tried to push me away, even if you thought you had to face this alone, I'm here now." His fingers intertwined with Jungkook, holding on as if that alone could anchor him to life. "You don't get to disappear without me knowing why," Jimin added softly. "You don't get to leave me with questions." Outside, the rain continued to fall, relentless and cold. Inside, Jimin held on like it was the only thing keeping the world from collapsing. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Jungkook's breathing steadied, just enough to give hope a fragile, dangerous shape. The rain didn't stop. It dragged across the glass like restless fingers, a quiet, endless reminder that time was moving whether Jimin was ready or not. Inside the dim hospital room, the world had narrowed into something fragile, breath, heartbeat, warmth that felt like it could vanish if he loosened his grip even slightly. Jimin didn't move. Not when the nurses came to check the IV lines, not when the doctor quietly spoke to him about stabilization and critical observation. Not even when the night deepened into that strange, heavy silence that only exists between midnight and dawn. He stayed exactly where he was, arms wrapped around Jungkook, forehead pressed to his, listening, counting every breath. Jungkook slept, but it wasn't peaceful. His brows twitched occasionally, lips parting as if he was trying to say something but couldn't quite reach the surface. His hand, still tangled weakly in Jimin's shirt, tightened every few minutes like a reflex, like even unconscious, he was afraid of being left behind. Jimin noticed everything he always had, he realized bitterly. Just not the one thing that mattered most. "You should have told me," Jimin whispered into the quiet, his voice hoarse from hours of holding back tears. "You tell me everything, why not this?" His thumb brushed gently across Jungkook's knuckles, tracing faint bruises from needles, the unnatural chill of his skin. It didn't feel like Jungkook, not the Jungkook who burned with energy, who laughed too loudly, who stayed up too late just to annoy him. This version felt breakable. "I would have stayed closer," Jimin continued softly. "I would have paid attention. I wouldn't have let you go through it alone." Silence answered him, but then a faint movement. Jimin stiffened instantly, pulling back just enough to see Jungkook's face. His eyelids fluttered slowly like they weighed too much to lift. Jimin's voice sharpened with fragile hope. Hey, I'm here." A shallow breath. Another, then finally Jungkook's eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, drifting, searching until they landed on Jimin, and something in them softened. "Still here," Jungkook murmured, his voice barely more than air. Jimin let out a quiet, shaky laugh that sounded dangerously close to breaking. "Where else would I go?" Jungkook's lips curved faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something else there now, something heavier, regret. "You should have gone home," Jungkook whispered. "You look worse than me." "Impossible," Jimin replied immediately, trying to keep his tone light even as his chest tightened. "You look like you lost a fight with a ghost." Jungkook huffed weakly, a ghost of a laugh escaping. "Maybe I did." Joke lingered between them for a second too long. Jimin didn't laugh this time. "What did you mean earlier?" he asked quietly, his voice lowering as the question finally forced its way out. "When you said you tried to hide it." Jungkook's gaze shifted, drifting away from Jimin's face to the ceiling above. The faint smile disappeared, replaced by something distant. "It started small," he said after a long pause. "Just tiredness. I thought it was normal. Schedules, performances, you know how it is." Nodded slowly, though his jaw tightened. "Then it didn't stop," Jungkook continued. "I'd sleep and still feel exhausted. My chest would hurt sometimes. I couldn't catch my breath during rehearsals." His fingers tightened slightly against Jimin's shirt. "I went to get checked alone." Jimin's breath hitched. He pushed, barely able to keep his voice steady. Jungkook hesitated, the silence stretched. "It wasn't something they could fix easily," he admitted finally, his voice softer now. "They told me to rest, to stop working, to slow down." Let out a hollow, disbelieving breath. "And you didn't listen." A faint, tired smile returned. "When have I ever?" "That's not funny," Jimin snapped quietly, emotion slipping through despite himself. "You should have told me. I would have forced you to stop." "I know," Jungkook said simply. That answer hit harder than any explanation. Jimin stared at him. "So you hid it because of me?" Jungkook finally looked back at him, not guilty, not defensive, just honest. "I didn't want you to look at me like this." The words landed softly, but they shattered something deep inside Jimin. "Like what?" Jimin asked, his voice trembling now. "Like I care, like I'm scared, like I don't know how to breathe when you're like this." Jungkook's gaze wavered for the first time. "I didn't want to be your worry," he whispered. "You already are." Jimin's voice broke, louder than he intended. He tightened his grip unconsciously, pulling Jungkook closer despite the wires and tubes between them. "You've always been my worry. That's not something you get to choose." The room fell silent again, heavy with everything they had never said before. Jungkook swallowed weakly, his hand shifting just enough to hold onto Jimin properly this time. I thought if I could just hold on a little longer, he murmured. If I could keep going, maybe it would go away. Shook his head, tears slipping down again. You're not invincible, Jungkook. I know that now, Jungkook replied softly. A fragile stillness settled between them. Then Jimin leaned forward, pressing his forehead firmly against Jungkook, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than anything he had said before. You don't get to protect me by hurting yourself, he said. That's not how this works. If you're in pain, I'm already in pain. Jungkook's breath faltered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, carefully, Jungkook shifted closer despite the weakness, resting just enough against Jimin's chest like he used to after long, exhausting days. I'm tired, Hayoung, he admitted, the words barely holding together. Jimin closed his eyes, tightening his arms around him instinctively. I know, he whispered. Then rest, stay, Jungkook added faintly. Jimin didn't hesitate, not going anywhere. Outside, the rain softened into a quiet drizzle. Inside, Jimin held him, not out of fear this time, but out of something deeper, steadier, like even in the face of something they didn't understand yet. This was one thing he could control. He could stay. And Jungkook, fragile but still here, finally let himself lean into that, not alone anymore.
Morning arrived quietly, as if afraid to disturb what little peace had settled in the room. A thin strip of pale light slipped through the curtains, brushing against Jungkook's face and revealing just how exhausted he looked. The shadows under his eyes had deepened, his lips faintly dry, his breathing still uneven, but steady enough to give Jimin something dangerous. Hope. Jimin hadn't slept, not even for a second. His back ached from the awkward position, his eyes burned, but he didn't care. Jungkook was still in his arms, still warm, barely, but enough, and that was all that mattered for now. A soft knock broke the fragile silence before the door opened. The doctor stepped in, followed by a nurse carrying a tray of medications. Their expressions were careful, practiced, but Jimin caught it instantly. That subtle hesitation, that flicker of concern they tried to hide. He tightened his hold slightly. How is he? Jimin asked, his voice low but firm. The doctor glanced at Jungkook, then at the monitors, then back at Jimin. He's stable, he said, not better, not improving, just stable. Jimin's jaw clenched. That's not an answer. The doctor exhaled slowly, stepping closer. It's the only honest one I can give right now. Jimin didn't respond. He just looked down at Jungkook, brushing a strand of hair away from his forehead with gentle precision, like even the smallest movement mattered. What exactly is wrong with him? Jimin asked after a moment, quieter now, but heavier. The doctor hesitated again. That was all the confirmation Jimin needed that whatever this was, it wasn't simple. We're still running tests, the doctor said carefully. But based on his symptoms and the progression, we suspect a rare systemic condition. It's affecting multiple organs, especially his lungs and cardiovascular system. Felt the words, but they didn't fully register. I'm hearing is that he's getting worse, he said flatly. The nurse adjusted one of the IV lines, her movements precise but quick, as if trying not to linger too long in the tension. There are treatment options, the doctor added. But we need confirmation first. And time. His voice trailed off. Time. That word echoed louder than anything else. Jimin swallowed hard. How much? The doctor didn't answer immediately. And that silence said everything. Jimin looked away, his chest tightening, something cold settling deep inside him. He had asked the question, but now he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. A faint movement broke through the heaviness. Jungkook stirred again. Jimin's attention snapped back instantly, his entire focus shifting as he leaned closer. Hey, I'm here. Jungkook's eyes fluttered open slowly, unfocused at first before settling on Jimin. There was a brief flicker of confusion, then recognition and relief. You're still here, Jungkook murmured. Jimin forced a small smile, though his throat felt tight. I told you. I'm not leaving. Jungkook's gaze shifted slightly, noticing the doctor and nurse in the room. His expression changed, subtle but unmistakable. He already knew. They told you? Jungkook asked softly. Jimin hesitated, then nodded. Jungkook exhaled slowly, eyes drifting toward the ceiling again. Then you know it's not something simple. No, Jimin replied quietly. But I also know you're not giving up. A faint, tired smile tugged at Jungkook's lips. You sound more confident than I feel. Good, Jimin said, his voice firmer now. Because one of us has to be. The doctor cleared his throat gently. We'll continue monitoring him closely. If there are any changes, we'll act immediately. Gave a short nod, though his attention had already returned to Jungkook. As the medical staff left the room, the door clicked shut softly behind them. Silence returned, but it felt different now, heavier, more real. Jungkook shifted slightly, wincing as he adjusted his position. Jimin noticed immediately, helping him without a word, supporting his back carefully until he was more comfortable. "You don't have to do everything," Jungkook muttered weakly. "I know," Jimin replied. "I want to." Jungkook looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable passing through his eyes. He asked quietly. The question caught Jimin off guard. "What do you mean, why? Why are you staying like this?" Jungkook clarified. "You haven't slept, you haven't left, you're holding on like I'll disappear if you don't." Didn't answer immediately because the truth was too simple. "Because you might," he said finally. Jungkook's breath faltered slightly. Jimin leaned closer, his voice soft but unwavering. "And I'm not taking that risk." The words settled between them, raw and unfiltered. Jungkook looked away first, his gaze dropping to his own hands. "I didn't think it would get this bad," he admitted. "At first, it was just something I could ignore. Something I could hide behind practice, performances, smiles." His fingers curled slightly against the blanket. "Then it started taking things," he continued. "My energy, my breath, my control." Jimin listened, every word sinking in like something he should have heard long ago. "I kept telling myself I'd stop when it got worse," Jungkook said. "But worse kept moving." A quiet bitterness slipped into his voice. "And now we're here." Reached out, taking Jungkook's hand gently, threading their fingers together. "Then we deal with it now," he said. "Together." Jungkook glanced at him again, searching his face like he was trying to find something. "You say that like it's simple." "It's not," Jimin admitted. "But it's real." A faint silence followed, then Jungkook's expression shifted slightly, more serious now, more focused. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said. Jimin's grip tightened instinctively. "What is it?" Jungkook hesitated. His breathing slowed, his gaze flickering with something that hadn't been there before, fear. "I didn't just go to one hospital," he said quietly. "I went to several." Jimin frowned slightly. "Why?" "Because none of them gave me the same answer." The room seemed to grow colder. "What do you mean?" Jimin asked, his voice dropping. Jungkook swallowed. "Some said it was autoimmune. Some said it was neurological. One said it might be genetic." He paused. "One of them," his voice faltered, said it didn't look like anything they'd seen before. Felt a chill run through him. "That's not possible," he said, though it sounded more like he was trying to convince himself. Jungkook let out a weak breath. "That's what I thought too." Stretched between them again, heavier than before. Jimin's mind raced, trying to make sense of it, trying to find something solid to hold on to. But nothing fit, nothing made sense, except one thing: Jungkook was running out of time. Jimin leaned forward again, pressing their foreheads together once more, his voice steady despite everything unraveling around them. "Then we find someone who does understand it," he said. "I don't care how rare it is or how complicated. We're not stopping here." Jungkook closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering what little strength he had left. "You're really not going to let this go, are you?" he murmured. Jimin didn't hesitate. "Never." Jungkook exhaled slowly, something fragile but real settling in his expression. For the first time since all of this began, he didn't look like he was carrying it alone. And even though the answers were still unclear, even though the future felt uncertain and dangerously thin, Jimin's arms around him felt solid. The hours stretched, bending into something shapeless and heavy, as if time itself had forgotten how to move forward. By late afternoon, the light in the room turned gold, soft, almost gentle, but it felt out of place against the quiet tension lingering in the air. Jimin hadn't let go of Jungkook's hand once. Not when the nurses came in, not when the machines were adjusted, not even when his own fingers started to ache. Jungkook drifted in and out of sleep, his body caught somewhere between exhaustion and resistance. Each time he woke, his eyes searched instinctively, and each time they found Jimin, still there, still holding on. "You're really not going anywhere," Jungkook murmured at one point, his voice rough from dryness. Jimin shook his head lightly, brushing his thumb across Jungkook's knuckles. "You keep asking like I'll change my answer." "People get tired," Jungkook said quietly. "I do," Jimin admitted, "just not of you." Words hung in the air, simple but impossibly heavy. Jungkook didn't reply immediately. Instead, his gaze softened in a way that felt almost fragile, like he was holding onto something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. "You're making this harder," he said after a while. Jimin frowned slightly. "How is that a bad thing?" "Because." Jungkook hesitated, his breathing shallow as he shifted slightly. "It was easier when I thought I could handle it alone." Leaned closer, his expression tightening. That was never true. Gave a faint, tired smile. It felt true. Settled between them again, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with everything they hadn't said, everything that had been building long before this hospital room, long before the diagnosis that didn't even have a name yet. Jimin studied Jungkook's face carefully, as if memorizing it. The curve of his lips, the way his lashes cast faint shadows against his cheeks, the subtle tension that never quite left his body anymore. "You were scared," Jimin said softly. Jungkook didn't deny it. "I still am," he replied, barely above a whisper. Jimin's chest tightened. He shifted slightly, bringing Jungkook closer without disturbing the wires too much, his arm firm but gentle around him. "Then don't do it alone anymore," Jimin said. "Be scared with me." Let out a weak breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "That's not very comforting." "It's honest," Jimin replied, and that somehow mattered more. A quiet moment passed before Jungkook spoke again, his voice lower now, almost hesitant. "Do you remember that night on the rooftop?" he asked. Jimin blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. "Which one?" "The one after the concert in Tokyo," Jungkook clarified. "When everyone else went out and we just stayed." Jimin's expression softened instantly, the memory unfolding in his mind like something distant but vivid. "You said you were too tired to celebrate," Jimin recalled. "But you still dragged me upstairs." Jungkook's lips curved faintly. "Because I didn't want noise, I just wanted quiet." "You made me sit there for hours," Jimin added, a hint of warmth returning to his voice. "You didn't even talk at first." "I was thinking," Jungkook said. "About what?" Jungkook's gaze shifted slightly, settling somewhere between Jimin and the fading light beyond the window. "About what happens when everything stops," he said. Jimin stilled. "I didn't understand what you meant back then," he admitted. "I didn't either," Jungkook said softly. "Not really." His fingers tightened slightly around Jimin's. "I think I was already feeling it," he continued. "That something wasn't right, that I was running out of something I couldn't name." Jimin's throat tightened. "And you didn't tell me." Jungkook shook his head faintly. "I didn't know how." A fragile silence followed, then Jimin leaned closer, his voice low but steady. "You don't have to know how anymore," he said. "You just have to say it." Looked at him again, really looked this time, as if weighing something important. "What if saying it makes it real?" he asked quietly. Jimin didn't hesitate. "It's already real," he said. "Ignoring it won't change that." Jungkook exhaled slowly, his body relaxing just a fraction against Jimin's hold. For a moment, it felt like the tension eased just enough to breathe. But then a sharp, sudden jolt ran through Jungkook's body. Jimin felt it instantly. His voice sharpened as he pulled back slightly. Jungkook's grip tightened painfully, his breathing hitching as his chest rose too quickly, too unevenly. Something was wrong, again. The monitor's rhythm faltered, beep, 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 then quickened, erratic. "No, no, hey, look at me," Jimin said urgently, cupping Jungkook's face gently. "Stay with me." Jungkook tried to respond, but his lips trembled, no sound coming out. A faint, choking gasp escaped instead. And then his body tensed violently. The oxygen line shifted as his breathing became shallow, rapid, like he couldn't get enough air no matter how hard he tried. "Help!" Jimin shouted, panic breaking through instantly. "Someone now!" The door burst open within seconds. Nurses rushed in, followed closely by the doctor, their movements swift and precise. "What happened?" He can't breathe." Jimin's voice shook as he refused to let go, even as they moved around him. "Oxygen levels are dropping. Get the mask now." Hands moved quickly, placing the oxygen mask over Jungkook's face, adjusting settings, checking vitals. Jimin stayed right where he was, one hand still gripping Jungkook's, the other hovering near his shoulder as if afraid to touch too much and make it worse. "It's okay," Jimin whispered desperately. "Just breathe, please, just breathe." Jungkook's eyes fluttered, unfocused, panic flickering within them as he struggled against his own body, then, slowly, agonizingly, the machines began to steady, not normal, but stable. Again, the room fell into a tense quiet once more. Jimin didn't realize he had been holding his breath until he finally exhaled, his entire body trembling now. The doctor checked the monitor one last time before stepping back, his expression more serious than before. "This is happening more frequently," he said quietly. Jimin looked up sharply. "Then do something." "We are," the doctor replied, calm but firm. "But we need a definitive diagnosis. Without that, we're only treating symptoms." Clenched his jaw, frustration and fear colliding. "That's not enough," he said. The doctor met his gaze. "I know." The words didn't help. Nothing did. As the medical staff slowly left again, the room returned to its fragile stillness. Jimin turned back to Jungkook immediately. His breathing was still uneven, but calmer now under the oxygen mask. His eyes were half-lidded, exhaustion pulling him under again. But his hand, still holding Jimin's, still there, Jimin leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper, filled with something deeper than fear now. "I'm not losing you," he said, not a promise, not yet. But something just as strong, a refusal. And even as the machines continued their quiet rhythm and the fading sunlight disappeared completely behind the horizon, Jimin held on tighter. Because somewhere deep inside, he could feel it. This wasn't just an illness anymore. It was a countdown.
The night came slowly, like a curtain being drawn over something that wasn't ready to end. The hospital room dimmed, shadows stretching across the walls as the last traces of daylight disappeared. Only the soft glow of monitors remained, blinking steadily, quietly, too quietly. Jimin sat exactly where he had been for hours, unmoving except for the subtle rise and fall of his chest. His hand still held Jungkook, fingers intertwined so tightly it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Jungkook hadn't woken up again, not fully. His breathing had stabilized, but it was fragile, too dependent on machines, too shallow to feel safe. Every now and then his fingers would twitch slightly, as if reaching for something in a dream he couldn't quite hold on to. Jimin leaned closer, his forehead resting gently against Jungkook's arm this time. His voice, when it came, was barely more than a breath. "You said you were tired," he whispered. "So rest, but not too far," answered him, but it wasn't empty. It carried everything they had said, everything they hadn't, everything that had been buried under years of laughter, distance, unspoken fears, and quiet love that neither of them had fully understood until now. Jimin closed his eyes briefly, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Not enough to sleep, just enough to make everything feel heavier. "I used to think I had time," he murmured. "Time to say things later, time to notice more, time to fix things." His grip tightened slightly. "I was wrong." A faint movement interrupted the stillness, so small Jimin almost thought he imagined it. But then Jungkook's fingers curled weakly around his again. Jimin's eyes snapped open instantly. Jungkook, slowly, with visible effort, Jungkook's eyelids lifted. His gaze was unfocused at first, drifting, searching until it found Jimin and stayed. There was something different this time, not panic, not confusion, just clarity. "Hyung," Jungkook's voice was barely audible beneath the oxygen mask, fragile but unmistakably present. Jimin leaned in immediately, relief crashing through him so suddenly it almost hurt. "I'm here, I'm right here." Jungkook blinked slowly as if grounding himself in that reality. "You didn't leave," he said. "I told you I wouldn't." A faint smile appeared, soft, tired but real. Jungkook's eyes studied Jimin's face carefully like he was memorizing it, taking in every detail with a quiet intensity that made Jimin's chest tighten. "You look terrible," Jungkook murmured weakly. Jimin let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. "You always pick the best timing to insult me." "I mean it," Jungkook whispered. "You didn't sleep." "Neither did you," Jimin replied gently. Jungkook's gaze softened again, something deeper settling beneath the surface. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Everything that mattered was already there, in the way their hands were still locked together, in the quiet understanding that had finally replaced all the things they used to hide. "I was scared," Jungkook said suddenly. Jimin stilled. "Of this," Jungkook continued, his voice fragile but steady. "Not of being sick." His fingers tightened slightly. "I was scared of leaving things unfinished." Swallowed hard, his throat tightening. "You're not leaving," he said quietly, though this time it sounded less like certainty and more like hope. Jungkook didn't argue. Instead, he shifted slightly, gathering what little strength he had, and lifted their joined hands just enough to press them gently against his chest. "Then stay with me," he whispered. "I am, just here," Jungkook added softly. "Not just in this room." Jimin's breath caught. Jungkook's eyes held his, steady despite everything. "Stay, even after this." The words settled heavily between them. Jimin didn't look away. "I don't know how to do that without you," he admitted, his voice barely holding together. Jungkook's lips curved faintly, something warm flickering beneath the exhaustion. "You do," he said. "You just don't want to." A tear slipped down Jimin's cheek before he could stop it. "I don't," he whispered. A quiet silence followed, but this time it wasn't heavy, it was gentle, like something finally understood. Jungkook's breathing slowed again, but it didn't feel like before. It wasn't a struggle. It wasn't desperate, it was calm, tired, peaceful. Jimin felt it instantly, the difference in the way his hand rested, the way his body relaxed against the bed, the way the tension that had clung to him for so long finally began to fade. Jimin said softly, leaning closer, his voice trembling just slightly. "Stay awake a little longer." Jungkook's eyes flickered, still focused on him. "I'm here," Jimin repeated. "You're not alone." I know, Jungkook whispered, and he did. For the first time since all of this began, there was no fear left in his eyes, only quiet acceptance and something else, gratitude. Jimin tightened his hold one last time, pressing their foreheads together gently, unwilling to create even an inch of distance. I'm not letting go, he said. Jungkook's lips parted slightly, a faint breath escaping. You don't have to, he murmured. The monitors continued their steady rhythm, filling the room with a soft, mechanical heartbeat. Jimin closed his eyes, holding on, not out of desperation anymore, but out of something deeper, something steady, something real. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time didn't feel the same anymore. Then, a subtle change, so small it almost went unnoticed. Jungkook's grip loosened, not suddenly, not painfully, just, gently. Like someone letting go of something they no longer needed to hold on to. Jimin's breath caught, his eyes opening instantly. Jungkook, no response. The monitor still beeped, but slower now, softer. Jimin leaned closer, his hand tightening instinctively around Jungkook's. I'm here, he whispered quickly. I'm still here. For a moment it felt like the world was holding its breath with him. Then Jungkook's chest rose one last time, a quiet inhale followed by a soft, almost imperceptible exhale, and stillness. The sound of the monitor stretched into a single, unbroken tone, flat. Endless, final. Jimin froze, not moving, not breathing. His fingers tightened around Jungkook's hand as if refusing to accept what his body already understood. No, he whispered, the word barely forming. No, you said. His voice broke. The door opened again, rushed footsteps, voices, but they felt distant, muffled, unreal. Nothing reached him, nothing mattered, because Jungkook's hand in his was still warm, but no longer holding back. Jimin lowered his head slowly, pressing his forehead against their joined hands, his shoulders trembling, not violently, not loudly, but quietly, like something inside him had cracked open in silence. You promised, he whispered. But even as the words left him, he knew Jungkook hadn't broken any promise. He had stayed until the very end, and in that final moment he hadn't been alone. The machines were turned off one by one, the room slowly falling into a different kind of silence. Not empty. Not cold, just still. Jimin didn't let go, not when the nurses stepped back, not when the doctor placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, not even when the world outside continued moving, unaware that something irreplaceable had just slipped away. He stayed, just like he said he would. And long after the room had quieted, long after everything that could be done had been done, Jimin finally lifted his head. His eyes were red, exhausted, but steady. I'm still here, he said softly, not to the room. Not to anyone else, but to Jungkook, and maybe, just maybe, to the part of him that would never really leave.